Hey guys, so I'm going to do a short video on validating HTML forms using JavaScript. And when I say validation, what I mean by that is that when we create our HTML form and we want the user filling out specific parts of the form, we want to be able to validate first, did the user fill out something, okay, where we wanted him to, like maybe we had a required field that we need data for. And then we want to check certain parameters, like do we want the user to only allow them a certain amount of characters in a field? Do we want to make sure that they've typed an actual specific amount of characters? And and then we want to also validate specific fields against each other to make sure they match, such as like if you're creating a registration form and you want to validate if the password that they've typed matches the verification password that they've typed, so that you know and they know that they've typed the correct password when registering to create a new account with a website or something that'll run in a backend PHP to actually register data into a database. So to start with, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a simple HTML page, and that can be done in any text editor, of course. I'm using a program called Coda, and that's on a Mac. You can use Notepad in Windows, you can use TextEdit in Mac, you can use Komodo, or any of the other ones that you can find that you can basically write text in, because we're just going to save this as a .html file. That's going to then submit a form after validation to call a PHP script. Okay? So to start with, of course, we're going to have to start with the opening HTML tag, and to that we're going to add a closing HTML tag. Then we are going to go ahead and start with an open head tag and a closing head tag. And because we're going to be writing some JavaScript, we're going to also add a script tag and a closing script tag. Within the HTML opening and closing tags, we are going to add what's necessary for our HTML form. And to do that, we're going to start with the opening body tag and the closing body tag. And inside of those tags, we're going to create a form. And the method for the form is going to be post. And we're going to give the form an ID as well, and we're just going to call this form. And the action here is going to be register.php, because that is that's what we're going to call. That's what we're going to post all of our form variables to that register.php file. The register.php file will then add all of that data into our database, and that is going to happen after we validate everything that's been entered into the form. Okay, so in our form, we're gonna create a few fields. We're gonna create a username field. We're gonna create a password field. With that, we're gonna create a verification password field to ask the user to type the password again. We're then gonna create an email field and a verification email field to also verify the email address. Okay. So let's start with that, and the way we do that is we start with input, and we're going to tell it the input type is text. Okay, we are going to give it an ID, name, and we're going to call it username, and we're also going to give it an ID and call that username as well. And then we're going to give it a placeholder value of username, and that's the placeholder value, if you're not familiar with this, in HTML adds a grayed out text to our input text box, basically displaying what we've just typed here. So username is going to be typed inside of our text box to indicate to the user that that's what needs to go into that text box. Okay, so then we're going to do input type equals password. And a password text box is basically the same as a normal text box, except for that it hides the characters as you're typing them. Okay. We're going to give this the name of password and also an ID of password. I'm going to set the placeholder to password. Okay. And then we're going to create another input type password. This one we'll call password verify. And the ID will also be password verify. And a placeholder, I will write verify password. And then we're going to do another input type equals text. The name is going to be email. The ID is going to be email. And the placeholder is going to be email. Then another one, input type equals text. Name equals email verify. Because again, we want the user to verify that they're typing in the email address properly. So then we're going to give this a placeholder of verify your email. And then we're going to create another input, and that is going to be of type button. Sorry, I had that backwards. It's going to be button type equals submit. Okay. And we're going to call this sign up. And then we're going to do a closing tag for our button. Alright, so I'm going to save this. I've already got this loaded up in my browser, so I'm just going to click refresh. And what we see here is username, password, verify password, email, and verify email. So if we click sign up right now, all that's going to happen is it's going to go to the registration page. Now obviously what we want to do is we want to verify these fields, and then if they all, match up with what we want, then we want this sign up to actually go to the registration page. Otherwise, we don't want it to go to the registration page at all, but instead we want to pop up an alert box that will show the user that they've either not typed something in, or that the passwords don't match, or that the email addresses don't match. So those are all things that we need to consider here. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to create a function here inside of our script tags, and we're going to call this one validate form. Okay. And in our button, okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to say onClick equals return validate form. Okay. So what this does is we are going to get a return value from validate form, and the return value is either going to be false or true. And if the return value is true, then the form will be submitted. Okay. If the the form won't be submitted. What's going to happen is we're going to have to actually create JavaScript code to submit the form. If the validate form returns false, then nothing will happen here at all. The form won't get submitted or anything. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and prove that to you. So we're going to just go ahead and write return false, okay, right off the bat. So what happens is we click the button, we're going to return the value from validate form. If the return value from validate form is false, then it should not load this registration page like it has done before. So let's go ahead and save that, go in here, refresh, and click sign up, and nothing happens. Okay, we're not going to the registration page. Perfect. So now what we need to do is we need to actually gather the data from these fields and then verify that the data is correct. There are a couple of ways that we can do this. The way that we're going to want to do it right now is we want to create separate functions to verify all of these fields, because the code's going to be rather long. Okay, because there's going to be several if statements involved with verifying each one of these. Because with, for instance, username, we're going to want to check to see if the username field is blank, first of all, because they're going to need to write a username in. So that's one if statement. Then we're going to need to check if the username has a specific length of characters, because we want to impose a minimum character count. And we are also going to want to check to see if the username is longer than a specific amount of characters, because we don't want super long usernames in our database, right? So let's do the restrictions at like 6 minimum and maybe 12 maximum for the characters. And then we'll also check to see if there are 0 characters, indicating that the username field is actually blank. So what we'll do is we'll go in here, we'll create a function, validate username, okay? And the way that we're going to do this is we need to gather, we need a variable, okay? So the variable is going to be, we'll call this var username value, username value. So the way that we're going to use, the way that we're going to get the values of our form elements is we're going to use something called the DOM, or short for the document object model, which is actually, it's kind of like, it's a programming interface, okay, for HTML and XML documents. So what that does is it actually provides us with a structured representation of the document, and it defines a way that the structure can be accessed from programs so that they can change the document structure, style, and content. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to parse our HTML document using the document object model and extract the value from our fields. Okay, so we do this by using document.get element by ID, and this is why we gave all of our elements IDs, right? So here we're going to want to grab the username, okay? So we specify username as the ID, okay? The ID string, which basically is this right here. So we're saying we want to get the element with the ID username. So we're now getting this entire element, okay? But what we want is we don't want the element, right? We want the value of that element. So we do dot value, all right? So that will give us whatever is typed into the username field. All right, so let's go ahead and go and call validate username from here. We get the username value, and then let's just do an alert box with the username value. So what all of this is going to do is we're going to click submit. It's going to get the return value validate form. Validate form is going to get called. Validate username is going to get called. Validate username is going to get the element value of our username text box, and then it's going to take that username value and alert, show us an alert box with the value of what we typed in the username. So we'll save that, go back into our file, refresh it, and we're going to click sign up. And of course, because we didn't type anything in, the alert box is empty. And we want to register because we're not returning false. So let's just do this, return false for now. Let's refresh, and then we'll type in something here. And we'll click sign up. And there you have it. And now we're back at the page. And now every time we click it, that's the value we get. We change the value, click sign up, value changes here. Okay, so we're constantly getting the value. All right, so but that's not form validation. Right now we're just printing values. We're just printing the values of our elements. And what we actually want to do is we want to check to see if they are what we expect them to be. So first, we want to know if the validate username function, we want to know if our username value is 0 characters long. So we're going to do if username value dot length is equal to 0. If that's true, then we return false, because we need to make sure that if there is no username, okay, if there's nothing typed in, then the length of our value is going to be 0. And we return false at that point, because right here with this validate username method, what we actually want to do is if validate username equals true, well, equals false, then we return false. Okay? So now we can get rid of this. So now watch what happens. If we go in and we leave the username field blank, we click sign up, nothing happens. We put something in here, we go to the registration page because we return true otherwise. Okay? So because we didn't return false here, we automatically return true. The only reason we returned false is because we're returning false with validate username if the length is 0. Now the other one we want to do is we want to go with else if username value dot length is less than 6, then we want to return false. And else if username value dot length is greater than 12, we want to return false. Alright, so now if we go back and refresh, sign up, nothing happens because username is blank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing happens because we only have 5 characters. Once we get to 6, sign up is working. Once we go back and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, we try to sign up, nothing happens. Well, that's great. But if all we ever do is not allow anything to happen when we click the sign up button, users are going to think that the web page is broken and nothing's going to happen. So they're just going to probably navigate away and go somewhere else. So we need to indicate to the user, hey, you know what, you use 13 characters, we only allow 12. Or you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we need at least 6. Or you didn't type a username and we wanted you to type one. So we need to have some kind of alert system here. So what we'll do is, before we return false, we simply go alert, username cannot be blank, and then here we do alert, username must be at least 6 characters. And here we do alert, username cannot be more than 12 characters. Alright, so now if we go back, refresh, username cannot be blank. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Username must be at least 6 characters. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Username cannot be more than 12 characters. Okay, and you see how that goes all in sequence, right? If one of them returns false, then the other ones don't matter because we're returning the function, we're ending it, we're saying return false. Okay, so validation username failed, so form will not be submitted. Okay, so that's validating the username. Now we're going to do our password validation. So we'll do function validate password. So var password value document get element by ID password value, and we'll also need our verification. Okay, so password verify value document get element by ID password verify dot value. Okay, so the first thing we'll check here is if the, first of all, if the password value if the password, if there has no password been entered. Okay, so we'll do if password value dot length equals 0. Then we'll do an alert. Password cannot be blank. And we'll return false. Okay. Then else if password value dot length is less than, we'll do 8. Alert. Password must be at least 8 characters. And we'll return false. Else if password value dot length, and for this one we'll just make it really long, okay, is greater than 255. Alert. Password cannot be more than 255 characters. And finally, we need to check, oops, I need to return false here. Finally, we need to check if the verification password matches. So if this is good, and that's good, and that's good, then we can check the very last part, which is password value does not equal password verify value. Alert. Passwords don't match. Return false. We don't need to check if our password verify value is 0 or less than 8 or greater than 255, because all we need to do is we need to check that for our initial password, and then we can just use our password verify value and see if it's equal to password value, because it has to be. Okay? So anything other than what password value equals, we can just say, hey, if this doesn't equal that, then we can't go any further. Alright, so same thing here. I'm going to do if validate password equals false. Return false. Okay. Save that. Refresh our page. The username cannot be blank, so we're going to go ahead and we already know the username testing validation works, so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password cannot be blank. Alright, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password must be at least 8 characters. 7, 8. Passwords don't match. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're both the same password now, and we get going to the registration page. Perfect. Alright, so now we're going to basically just do the same thing with the email that we did with the password. So we'll do function validate email var email value document dot get element by ID email dot value var email verify value document dot get element by ID email verify dot value if email value dot length equals 0 alert email cannot be blank return false. And with the email, I'm going to say that an email address should have at least at least 5 characters. Okay, that leaves room for the short 2 letter top level domains like .us So the dot and the U and the S, that's already 3 characters, and then you add the at symbol and at least 1 character before it. So you could have A at US, or sorry, A at A.US, A at A.US. Okay, so 6 characters at the very least. That would be the one of the shortest email addresses ever. But 6 characters, so we'll go with that. Else if email value dot length is less than 6, then alert email is invalid. Return false. We don't want email addresses longer than 255 characters. Alert email cannot be more than 255 characters. Return false. And finally, we will make sure that the email addresses match. Email value doesn't equal email verify value. Alert. Email addresses do not match. And return false. Okay. And the final thing, we actually have to call that if validate email false, return false. Okay. All right. Let's save that. Refresh our form. Username cannot be blank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password cannot be blank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Passwords don't match. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Email cannot be blank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Email is invalid. 6. Email addresses do not match. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's just try it. 7. Email addresses do not match. Take 1 away. And there we go, to the registration page. Alright, so that pretty much covers the basics of validation using JavaScript to validate HTML forms. And the next part of that, of course, would be to capture those form variables in your PHP file, and then to add that data to the database using PHP. So that's it on validation. If you have any questions, please let me know. All right, thanks a lot.